testimony, his grasp of the Word of God. Be blessed today. Give a warm welcome to Andrew McNair as he comes. Andrew?
Good morning. Oh man, I wish you could have been there. I was in Dothan, Alabama at the Atlanta Bread Company, just finishing a breakfast meeting when I was making my way to my car. I spotted him there, the homeless man. The first thing that came to my mind was, sadly, Andrew, you don't have any money, you don't have anything to give this man. You're either going to come off embarrassed or you're going to become rude. And so I did what any logical man would do. I ran to my car, jumped in, and put the key in the ignition. Sadly, I thought I was safe, and I was sitting there looking in my rear view, watching him pass by, and I thought I was safe. But then there it was. And I was totally surprised. And I rolled down the window, and I said, sheepishly, well, sir, how can I help you? He said, in no way. He said, I want to bless your day. He said, I have a gift card to Atlanta Bread Company, and I want to give it to you. And I tried to make my case. I said, sir, I don't need this car. I don't live here. I'll probably never use it either. But he wouldn't budge. He said, someone bless my day, and I want to bless yours. So there I was, humbled by a homeless man. Sadly, I didn't know I was about to eat a whole nother slice of humble pie. And I'll share with you what happened next, but you'll have to wait, because in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to share with you 3 foundational phrases that are within that story and that ultimately shaped my life. Pastor Ron asked me to come and share with you the event or the person that made me so passionate about tithing. The truth is, there was no defining moment. There was never a burning bush moment or thunderous words coming down from heaven. Sadly, all I had was a conviction. And that's why I encourage others like me that are looking for a sign not to, because that sign may never come. Instead, follow your convictions down the deepest of rabbit holes, and the Lord will provide a lamp to your feet. I can assure you I had doubts, because that lamp around my feet sometimes looked like a mag light that was missing a double A. And other times, I had to argue with the Lord, saying, is this really what you lead me to do? And here I am today on stage. I would have never guessed that 8 years ago. But these 3 foundational phrases, if you internalize them like I did, these pearls that I picked up from my mentors, from my parents, and from reading the Word, they can actually take your spiritual growth and your tithing to the next level. So let's jump right in. The first foundational phrase I want to share with you today is that God honors you, the obedient, but rebukes the reluctant. That's not original for me. That comes straight out of the parable of the talents. And for anyone that's not familiar with it, I'll give you the kind of the Cliff Notes version. It's right in the middle of Matthew where he says a master was leaving his house to go on a trip. And he entrusted 3 slaves with his talents. And give you a perspective, a talent was worth 20 years of a laborer's daily wage. So it was something substantial. He gave the first slave 5 talents, the second 2 talents, and the other talent he gave to 1 slave. As he went away for his trip, the first 2 were obedient. They actually invested their talents and were wise with and obedient, while the other one was reluctant. He buried it in the sand along with his head. So he sat there, and when the master came back, he rebuked the last one, saying, you were not wise and obedient with the talents I entrusted you. See, when I read that parable of the talents, that didn't make sense to me. Why was he rebuked? Why was he punished? See, he wasn't greedy. He wasn't a cheater. He wasn't a swindler. That man wouldn't even been the target of the Occupy Wall Street movement. See, that man was a sideliner. He was guilty of sitting on the sidelines with great opportunity. See, I have many people that come to me and say, I would love to tithe, Andrew, but don't you know the economy's tough? Don't you know the job market's bleak? Don't you know the political environment is up in the air? It's all of these things. But God gives us the power to overcome. The story I want to share with you is a personal story, and it's about my great-grandfather who ran the Cravey grocery store. Actually, near here is by Oscars, if anyone knows, familiar with that area. When he ran that store, it was in the worst of times, right in the middle of the Great Depression. See, the economy was tough. There was no job market to speak of. and the political environment didn't offer much hope. See, there were plenty of people starving and going hungry, but my grandfather was led to be obedient when it was easy to be reluctant. See, when he saw a can of peas, he didn't see just 5 cents. He saw the 5 smiles it could provide. See, that's why I want to share with you today that you have to be obedient when others are reluctant. Because if you haven't been a Christian long enough, you know that many people think you're crazy already. And when you tithe the full 10%, people are going to look at you crazy because others are reluctant. So I challenge you to be obedient. In my third book, I say there's a big difference between giving and tithing. The Lord doesn't just ask us to give here and there when it's easy. He asks us to be obedient and commit 100% the tithe, a full 10% of your income. So are you scared today, church? Are you too comfortable to take the leap of faith? Well, I encourage you to be courageous, church. And when that courage dims, like it did in my path, remember Psalms 31:24, which says, "Be of good courage, and the Lord shall strengthen your heart and all that you hope in the Lord." See, courage is not the absence of fear, but working in spite of it, as Mark Twain once said. See, God wants to honor your faithfulness. Will you let him? And that leads me to my second foundational phrase, which is you have to invest to pass the test. A lot of times when you tithe 10% of your income, it's going to feel like a test. And we were speaking earlier this morning, Pastor Ron, the Lord never asked you to test him. Because if anyone remembers, when Jesus went into the wilderness and the devil was tempting him, the devil said, "Jesus, throw yourself off these cliffs and command the angels to come and protect you." Do you remember what he said? He said, "Do not test the Lord your..." Exactly. But in Malachi, that same God, which he never contradicts himself, says, test him in your tithes and see that he doesn't throw open the storehouse and pour his blessings on you. Well, I promise you that you'll live a comfortable and successful life? Anything but. Because to be a Christian, you're going to be different, especially when others are reluctant. But I can promise you that when you commit 100%, you'll see that your tithes and offerings are used by the Lord to glorify himself. Do we live in an instant gratification society? Raise your hands. Absolutely. I think our attention span is like the length of a gnat's wingspan. And T.S. Eliot put it beautifully. He said, "We're distracted from distraction by distractions." If you look at the internet or the web, it's 50% video now. It's because we don't have time to read. We don't have time to even talk to each other now. That's why we text and tweet. See, our society is growing impatient, but it's going to take patience to see that the Lord works through your tithes and offerings. So you have to give him time. But his time is different than ours, and that's hard. When I look to see a great role model that passed the test, look no further than the Bible. Because Joseph McDreamy, when he was dreaming and he had all these different tests that he had to conquer over life, how about being thrown into slavery by his own brothers? I thought we all had family problems, right? He was accused of rape and then actually thrown in prison. See, I assure you, he had many doubts if he was going to pass the test with his resources and his life. But he passed with flying colors because he sought the Lord when it became hard. So, church, will you give the Lord time and commit 100% to your tithes and offerings and be patient to see that he works through your tithes and offerings? The last foundational phrase I want to share with you is you have to start early and finish dearly. To the youth, age doesn't matter unless you're cheese. Someone got that. Jesus finds our age insignificant. He calls all of us to tithe. He calls all of us to glorify him. He calls all of us to make disciples and be pure. See, the Lord doesn't put an age bracket on obedience. He led David to defeat Goliath when the armor didn't fit. See, I want to encourage you, youth, to tithe the full 10% of your income, even if it's just your monthly allowance. Because I stand here among you, I've used all the excuses. Well, I don't make a lot of money. I don't have a lot of money. That's my parents' responsibility. I'll tithe later. Sadly, if you don't get rid of these excuses today, These will be the same stumbling blocks you find yourself saying 30 years from now. To the older generation, to the seasoned, as I like to call it, you need to finish dearly. And dearly, by definition, means with much loss or suffering at great cost. As sometimes when you commit 100% in the beginning, it will feel like a sacrifice. But is it? See, any sacrifice we endure is merely insignificant to what Jesus volunteered for us. Also, the thing that's rough for me is the third point, which is you have to start early and finish dearly. When you're finishing, it's a hard race. And sometimes we think about it as a sprint, but it's really a marathon, and that's our faith. So I beg you to finish dearly, even at great cost. And to the whole church, why don't we tithe? I feel like we would love to tithe, but we're just not equipped to do so. That's why in the third book, I gave a couple ways, there are tangible ways that you can tithe more today without even feeling it. Also, I feel that we don't tithe because we think it's a nicety. It's just something we can do if we can afford to. It's more than that. It's more than just a ritual. It's a way of life. Because your friends, your family, everyone watches how you spend your money. Tithing is part of your testimony. It's your living testimony. So youth, will you start early? To the season, will you finish dearly? Because suffering builds perseverance. As Romans 5:3 says, not only so, but we must rejoice in our sufferings because it builds perseverance. So there I was, humbled by a homeless man. I told you I was about to eat another slice of humble pie. So I was driving down the car. Curiosity tugged at me. I said, well, I got to know what's on that card. So I dialed the number, and I selected to hear the balance. And that monotone voice came over. It said, you have $97. My heart sank because that was a gift I could not receive from that homeless man. And if I wasn't far enough, I would have went and took it back to him because that's just a gift I couldn't take. Fast forward a few weeks later, that same gift card is being used by a local Baptist children's home to help splurge on kids. See, you have to remember and internalize these three foundational phrases. See, my great-grandfather never knew that because he was obedient when others were reluctant, that people would come later on in life, years after the store closed, and say, I owed you this debt. Joseph never knew if he invested to pass the test that he had actually saved Israel and Egypt from hunger. He never knew that he'd become second in command of Egypt. And the third is you have to start early and finish dearly. That homeless man never knew that that gift, when he blessed me, was going to bless other kids in need. So I challenge you, church, internalize these three foundational phrases and take your tithing to the next level. Thank you, Pastor Ron.
Thank you, my brother. You know, as now you can see why I wanted you to hear Andrew's heart. Incredible